It is day 49. For those following the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, that number carries a haunting weight. If you're a regular here, you know exactly why. It was on day 48 that the net finally closed around Brian Kohberger in the Idaho student murders. We have officially crossed that Rubicon, passing the timeline of one of the most complex manhunts in recent memory. And yet, in the Guthrie case, the silence from official channels is becoming deafening. The Pima County Sheriff's Department has hinted at a lack of leads, a lack of probable cause, and a void where a suspect should be. It feels like the momentum has stalled, but tonight we are breaking through that wall of silence. If you are new to the Mitchell Report, hit that subscribe button immediately, because when a case of this magnitude hits the 8-week mark without an arrest, the window for justice begins to narrow, and you need the boots-on-the-ground analysis that the mainstream media is glossing over. The investigation into Nancy Guthrie's abduction hasn't just hit a snag, it has entered a phase that insiders call the grind. And what's happening behind the scenes at the FBI field office in Tucson suggests this is anything but a cold case. To understand where we are, we have to look at the atmosphere inside the Pima County Sheriff's Department. There is a growing rift between the rank-and-file deputies and the leadership under Sheriff Nanos. While the public sees a unified front at press conferences, the reality is much more fractured. I recently spoke with Sergeant Aaron Cross, president of the Pima County Deputies Organization. He's the man with his finger on the pulse of the department, and his assessment of the situation is blunt. The department is essentially split in two. On one side, you have the task force. This is a small elite group, less than half a dozen homicide investigators from Pima County, paired with a team of FBI agents. They've moved out of the main sheriff's building and into the FBI's secure facility in Tucson. This move wasn't just for extra desk space. It was a tactical decision to black out the investigation. Information is now so tightly compartmentalized that even veteran deputies on the outside have no idea what the lead investigators are looking at. Meanwhile, the rest of the department has been told to go back to business as usual. Patrol officers are back on their standard beats, and general detectives are working their normal rotations. This creates a strange paradox for the residents of Pima County. They see the police going about their daily routines as if the boogeyman the sheriff warned them about has simply vanished, while a shadow team works in a bunker trying to find a woman who disappeared from her own home 49 days ago. This business-as-usual approach is fueling a sense of hopelessness among the public, but it's actually a classic investigative pivot. The most frustrating part of this 49-day odyssey has been the shifting narrative from the top. Early on, the community was told there was no reason to fear, implying the threat was isolated or perhaps domestic. Then the tone shifted 180 degrees with warnings that a predator was on the loose and could strike again. The confusion stems from the very first 24 to 49 hours of the investigation, a period many veteran officers now view as a series of critical missteps. According to Sergeant Cross, the early focus was overwhelmingly on Nancy's family and her brother-in-law. Investigative 101 dictates that you clear the inner circle first, but in this case, that focus might have come at a heavy price. The crime scene, Nancy's home, was released far too early, while the sheriff's department was busy towing the family's car and obtaining warrants for their properties. The actual perpetrator was likely putting miles between himself and the scene. There is a technical term for where the investigation sits right now, the grind phase. When a case doesn't break quick and easy, which usually happens when a suspect is low intelligence or leaves an obvious trail, it settles into a war of attrition. The task force is currently sifting through a mountain of data. We're talking about roughly 40,000 tips. To put that in perspective for you, if an investigator spent just 5 minutes looking at every single tip, it would take one person over 3,300 hours just to read them, let alone investigate them. And as Sergeant Cross points out, a massive percentage of these are noise, armchair detectives offering theories like check around the house, which have to be cataloged and dismissed. But buried in that noise is the signal, the one tiny detail that links the perpetrator to the crime. Despite the frustration and the quiet coming from the FBI building, there is a technical beacon of hope that hasn't been fully explained to the public until now. It involves a lab in Deerfield Beach, Florida, and a piece of evidence that could change everything: unknown male DNA found inside Nancy Guthrie's home. The department is hanging a massive amount of weight on this sample. Now, skeptics will tell you that unknown male DNA in a home could be anything: an electrician, a delivery driver, a previous guest. But the task force isn't treating this like a random sneeze on a kitchen counter. The source of this DNA is likely in a clean area somewhere a stranger would have no reason to be, like Nancy's bedding, or a specific point of struggle. The real bombshell here is the technology being used to analyze it. Word from inside the department is that the Florida lab is utilizing state-of-the-art DNA sequencing that wasn't even scheduled for public rollout until 2027. They are rushing this technology specifically for the Guthrie case. This isn't just a standard CODIS upload. They are likely performing investigative genetic genealogy, IgG. This is the same high-tech family tree sleuthing that caught the Golden State Killer and more recently, Brian Kohberger. The issue they're facing is that the sample is partial and mixed. In layman's terms, Nancy's DNA is likely swirled together with the suspect's, and the suspect's profile isn't complete. Standard police labs can't do much with that. But this specialized Florida lab is essentially cleaning the sample and using this futuristic tech to build a profile. Even a partial profile can be enough to start building a genealogical map. They are looking for third, fourth, or fifth cousins, and then working the family tree back down to a single male who was in Pima County on the night Nancy disappeared. It is slow, meticulous work, but it is the most powerful weapon they have. The question on every Pima County resident's mind is, why isn't there a massive shoulder-to-shoulder grid search of the desert? We've seen it in almost every high-profile missing persons case in American history. From the search for the Idaho students to the massive volunteer efforts in the Kelsey Barrett case, the community usually comes together to comb every inch of the landscape. But in the Nancy Guthrie case, the search was effectively called off within 30 hours. This decision came directly from the command staff, Sheriff Nanos, and his inner circle. According to Sergeant Cross, the decision to scale back the search and focus on the home as a crime scene rather than a missing person case is one of the most baffling aspects of the entire investigation. If you aren't searching the desert, you are essentially conceding that she is either being held in a structure or that you already know where she is. The Arizona desert is beautiful, but it is also one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth. If Nancy was taken by a lone actor, logic suggests he wouldn't have been able to move her very far from a roadside. We're talking 100 to 200 yards tops. In past Arizona cases, bodies have been recovered years later, often by hikers or hunters, just a few hundred feet from established trails. The fact that the sheriff's department rebuffed offers of help from outside groups, including specialized units with quads and off-road capabilities, has left a bitter taste in the mouths of local volunteers. The official reason given was control. The sheriff didn't want uncoordinated groups trampling potential evidence. But as the days turn into weeks, that explanation is wearing thin. There is a vast expanse of desert, both east and west of the city, where a body could be hidden in a shallow grave. In the dry Arizona heat, those graves eventually reveal themselves through erosion or animal activity. But by refusing to launch a coordinated grid search early on, the department may have missed the window to find Nancy before the elements took their toll. Now, let's talk about the ghost of January 11th. This is where the investigation takes a truly cinematic and disturbing turn. For weeks, the public was shown two distinct images of a suspect. In one, he has a backpack and a visible sidearm. In the other, he is empty-handed. For a long time, the sheriff's department allowed the public to believe these were from the same night, but investigative pressure from outlets like Fox News eventually forced a correction. The empty-handed image was actually captured on January 11th, nearly 3 weeks before Nancy disappeared. This changes everything. It proves that this wasn't a random crime of opportunity. This was a scouting mission. The suspect wasn't just wandering through the neighborhood. He was studying the layout of the Guthrie home. He was testing the security. He was likely checking the dead zones of the cameras. Sergeant Cross, who has viewed the footage hundreds of times with an investigator's eye, noted something chilling. The suspect didn't look like he was stumbling in the dark. Pima County neighborhoods can be pitch black at night. No streetlights, no ambient glow. Yet this man moved with a level of familiarity that suggested he had walked that path before. Even more disturbing, neighbors are now reporting that investigators are asking about another date, January 24th. If the suspect was there on the 11th and again on the 24th, we are looking at a predator who was stalking his prey with military-like precision. He wasn't just MacGyvering a kidnapping, he was rehearsing it. This raises a massive red flag. If he was there multiple times, how many other cameras in the neighborhood caught a glimpse of his vehicle? The task force is currently grinding through weeks of residential doorbell footage, looking for a repeating vehicle pattern that matches those dates. If this suspect was scouting the home, how did he know Nancy? This leads us to the contractor theory. In many abduction cases, most notably the Nancy Woodrum case in California, the perpetrator is someone who had a legitimate reason to be near the home months or even years prior: a painter, an electrician, a landscaper. These individuals have the cloak of invisibility. No one suspects a man in a high-visibility vest or a branded work truck. They get to see the interior of the house, they learn the resident's schedule, and they see exactly where the cameras are mounted. Sergeant Cross confirmed that while the initial investigation focused on immediate neighbors, the grind is now expanding to every contractor who worked in that zip code over the last 3 years. But there's a major hurdle: timing. If the suspect is a contractor and he saw the national news coverage on day 2, he's had 6 weeks to disappear. We are less than an hour from the Mexican border. As any local will tell you, heading south is like a McDonald's drive-thru. The federal agents often just wave you through. There is no outbound passport check that would stop a person of interest from crossing into Sonora. The FBI is likely tapping into their network of confidential informants, CIs in border towns like Nogales. These informants are paid for anomalies, stories of a gringo showing up suddenly, looking for a place to hide or acting erratically. But if the suspect was smart enough to scout the house for weeks, he was likely smart enough to have an exit strategy that didn't involve leaving a trail at the border. The internal politics of the Pima County Sheriff's Department are now becoming a side story that could impact the justice Nancy Guthrie deserves. There is an active recall effort against Sheriff Nanos. This isn't just political bluster. It's a reflection of a community that feels misled. When the sheriff says, "We've known since day 1 why he was there," it creates a massive credibility gap. If they knew the motive on day 1, why were they polygraphing the family on day 3? Why were they searching the son-in-law's car on day 10? You cannot have it both ways. Either you had a singular focus on a specific motive, or you were casting a wide net because you were lost. The 2-year investigator revelation is perhaps the most stinging: to assign the most significant kidnapping in the county's history to a detective with only 24 months of homicide experience, while veteran titans of the department were sidelined or transferred to patrol is, at best, a management failure. At worst, it suggests that leadership didn't realize the gravity of the case until the FBI stepped in and forced a reorganization. The mood in the department is quiet, but it's the quiet of a pressure cooker. The veterans are waiting for the DNA. The patrol officers are waiting for a lead, and the family is waiting for a miracle. We are at day 49, and while the Kohberger Metric says an arrest is possible any day, the reality of the grind is that this could be a long winter in the desert. As we push deeper into the second month of this investigation, we have to address the elephant in the room: the ransom demands. Early on, the airwaves were flooded with reports of communication from kidnappers seeking a payday. To the average American watching the news, this felt like a break in the case, a motive, a trail, a reason. But inside the Pima County Sheriff's Department, the veteran investigators were never buying it. Sergeant Cross confirmed what many of us suspected: these were red herrings. In high-profile cases like the Guthrie abduction, the bottom feeders of the criminal world come out of the woodwork. These are individuals, often tech-savvy opportunists or career scammers, who monitor police scanners and news cycles to glom onto a tragedy. They craft messages designed to sound authentic, sometimes using publicly available details to verify their claims. However, there is a lingering question that still haunts the Guthrie family. Did any of these communications contain non-public information? The sheriff has kept a tight lid on the specifics of those demands. If a scammer knew about the blood inside the house or the specific state of Nancy's bedroom before the media did, then we aren't talking about a random nerdwell. We're talking about an accomplice. The family's public plea, asking for Nancy back so we can celebrate with her, was a heart-wrenching moment that suggested they might have been receiving much darker information than the public. When a family pivots from find her to give her back to us, it often implies they've been forced to reconcile with the worst-case scenario. If the task force has intercepted communications suggesting Nancy is no longer alive, that changes the grind from a rescue mission to a recovery and homicide investigation. But as of today, no one in the 40,000 tip pile has been officially linked to a legitimate ransom plot. Let's look at the man with the bite light. This is a detail from the surveillance footage that has professional investigators leaning in. In the video, as the suspect approaches the archway of the Guthrie home, you see a brief, sharp flicker of light near his face. It's not a flashlight in his hand, it's a bite light, a small LED device held between the teeth to keep both hands free. This tiny detail is a massive window into the suspect's mindset. A bite light is a tool of a worker, an electrician in a crawl space, a plumber under a sink, or a hunter dressing game in the dark. It's not something a random smash-and-grab burglar typically carries. It suggests a person who is used to working with their hands in confined, dark spaces. More importantly, it shows he knew the terrain. As he reaches the step leading into the entryway, he bites down, illuminating the footing exactly when he needs to. This isn't a man stumbling through a dark Arizona night. This is a man who had mapped out the physical obstacles of that porch. He knew where the step was, he knew where the camera was, and he knew exactly how much light he needed to navigate without alerting the neighbors. This brings us back to the MacGyver moment with the vines. Many people thought he was trying to be stealthy by covering the camera with leaves. But looking at the physics of it, Sergeant Cross and other investigators believe he was trying to use the vines as leverage. He was trying to wedge the organic material between the camera housing and the bracket to pry it off the wall. When that failed, he likely used brute force. Reports of glass fragments found on the porch suggest the camera didn't just come off, it was shattered. This tells us the suspect is strong, determined, and capable of quick, improvised problem-solving under pressure. As the investigation enters its 8th week, the cold case shadow begins to loom. In law enforcement, a case is cold when all leads are exhausted. The tips stop coming in, and there is no more active work to be done. Sergeant Cross is adamant that the Guthrie case is nowhere near cold, but he admits the energy has shifted. In the first few weeks of a high-stakes investigation, the department is electric. There's a buzz. Phones are blowing up. SWAT teams are on standby, and assets are being moved around like chess pieces. That buzz has died down. The task force has moved to a secure off-site location, and the regular deputies are back to writing traffic tickets and responding to domestic calls. This transition is dangerous for public perception. To the people of Tucson, it looks like the police have given up. But in reality, this is when the most important work, the forensic gumshoeing, happens. The task force is currently building a digital geofence around the Guthrie home. They are serving warrants to Google, Apple, and cellular providers to identify every single device that pinged off the local towers on the nights of January 11th, January 24th, and the night of the abduction. This is a monumental task. It involves thousands of data points. They have to filter out the neighbors, the delivery drivers, and the late-night commuters. They are looking for a recurring device, a phone or a vehicle GPS that was present on all 3 critical dates. If they find that digital ghost, the grind will end instantly with a high-risk raid, but until that data comes back from the tech giants, the department has to maintain a posture of business as usual to avoid tipping off the suspect. The direct impact on the American public, and specifically the residents of Pima County, cannot be overstated. This case has fundamentally changed how people in the Southwest view their own security. The south side of Tucson is a place where people are used to a certain level of rugged independence. But the Guthrie abduction has introduced a new kind of fear, the stalker predator. We are seeing a surge in local residents installing high-end security systems, not just simple doorbell cameras. People are realized that a camera is only a deterrent if the criminal cares about being seen. The suspect in this case clearly didn't care. He knew where the cameras were, and he came prepared to disable them. This has led to a bunker mentality among seniors in the community. Sergeant Cross noted that his officers are taking dozens of calls a day from frightened elderly citizens, asking for security audits of their homes. This fear is exacerbated by the sheriff's contradictory statements. When the community is told, "Don't worry," and then told, "Lock your doors," the result is a total breakdown in public trust. This trust is the currency of law enforcement. If the public doesn't trust the sheriff, they stop calling in tips. They stop being the eyes and ears of the department. The recall effort against Sheriff Nanos isn't just about politics. It's a desperate attempt by the community to find a leader who will provide clarity instead of shooting from the hip at press conferences. The Guthrie case has become a litmus test for how modern American law enforcement handles meticulous criminals. If a suspect who scouts a house for 3 weeks and leaves DNA behind can stay hidden for 49 days, it sends a terrifying message to every other predator out there. That is why the task force cannot afford to let this go cold. The stakes aren't just about finding Nancy. They're about proving that in the age of DNA and digital geofencing, there is no such thing as a perfect crime. The most critical development we are watching right now involves a sophisticated digital dragnet that the FBI has quietly draped over the entire Tucson area. While the public focus remains on physical evidence like DNA and the bite light, the real breakthrough is likely happening in the binary world of cellular data and GPS pings. When the task force moved into the FBI building, they gained access to tools that the local Pima County Sheriff's Department simply doesn't have in-house. We're talking about tower dumps. Every cell phone within a 3-mile radius of the Guthrie home on January 11th, January 24th, and the night of the abduction is being cross-referenced. If a single device appears on all 3 dates at the specific times the suspect was caught on camera, that is your smoking gun. But here is the catch. What if the suspect was digitally dark? If he was professional enough to scout a house and attempt to disable cameras, he was likely smart enough to leave his phone at home or use a Faraday bag. This is where the investigation shifts to vehicle identification. The FBI is currently scrubbing every piece of license plate reader LPR data from the main arteries leading into Nancy's neighborhood. They aren't just looking for the night she disappeared, they are looking for the scouting vehicle from 3 weeks prior. This level of analysis is why the case feels stalled to the public. It takes weeks, sometimes months, for tech companies to comply with these massive data warrants. The legal hurdles are immense. But once that data is in the hands of the task force, they can build a pattern of life for the suspect. They will know where he lives, where he works, and where he went after he left the Guthrie property. The grind isn't a lack of movement, it's the slow, methodical tightening of a digital noose. As we cross day 49, the Nancy Guthrie case stands at a crossroads that will define the legacy of law enforcement in Pima County. We have seen the Kohberger timeline come and go, leaving a community searching for answers in a desert that holds its secrets tightly. From the bite light and the MacGyver vines to the state-of-the-art DNA tech being rushed from Florida, the pieces of this puzzle are finally beginning to form a picture, even if that picture is currently locked behind the secure doors of an FBI field office. For the Guthrie family, every hour is a fresh agony. For the people of Tucson, every shadow on a porch is a potential threat. But as Sergeant Cross reminded us, the odds are always in favor of the law. A perfect crime is a myth. It only takes one mistake, one digital footprint, or one person deciding that a $1.2 million reward is worth more than their silence. The grind phase is where the pretenders are separated from the professionals. And right now, the most elite investigators in the country are refusing to let Nancy's story end in the silence of the Arizona sands. If this breakdown helped you see the full picture of what's really happening behind the scenes, do me a favor, share this video with someone who needs the facts. Hit that like button to help us push past the noise. And subscribe so you don't miss the moment this case finally breaks wide open, because the next update could change everything we know about Nancy's disappearance. The Mitchell Report. Thank you for watching.